welcome back to my channel, Notes from the Sewing Room. My name's Becky. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. Rather than showing you what I've made already or showing you plans that I have for the future, I'm actually going to do a tutorial. And today's tutorial is going to be all about upcycling an old man's shirt into a face mask. So this is so easy. You basically don't need a pattern. You can use an old man's shirt, you could use an old lady's shirt, you could probably use an old t-shirt if you wanted to, although to be honest I've not tried this pattern out using something stretchy. This is a regular cotton shirt, which I think is ideal because it allows you to breathe through the mask. The mask looks like this. So the mask is going to have two strings at the back. I say strings, it's basically elastic, and then it's going to fit onto your face nicely at the front so it forms a nice covering. You will also need some elastic for this. You're going to need 40 centimetres of elastic times 2. So that's basically two separate pieces of 40 centimetre long elastic. I'm just using this regular kind of dressmaking elastic that I already had in my stash, but you can probably use any kind of elastic that you have got lying around, whether that be slightly thicker or slightly thinner. This is probably about 2 centimetres wide, and it's just kind of regular white elastic. The only other things you're going to need for this tutorial is either some chalk, this is regular children's chalk, or you could use a regular biro pen or something like that. You're going to need a dinner plate, so this is just a regular dinner plate that we'd use any night of the week. The other thing you're going to need is some scissors. So these are regular kitchen scissors that I wanted to show you for the sake of if perhaps you don't have any dressmaking scissors at home. And the final thing you're going to need is a sewing machine or a hand sewing needle with some thread. So this tutorial is actually based on something that I found on YouTube after spending quite a long time looking online for that kind of perfect no pattern face mask that I could have a go at. And it's actually based on something from Crafty Daily. However, I have added in a few changes of my own. So this includes using, like we said, the old shirt to make this, and using 2 pieces of elastic rather than 1, and actually using the elastic in a different way to the original tutorial. This is so easy and straightforward. If you're not a regular sewer, don't worry, I'm going to guide you through each and every step of the process, and it's going to be ready in no time at all. Let's get to it. So let's make our face mask. This is so easy, so straightforward. Even if you've not done much sewing before, you're going to be fine. So all you will need, like I said, is a plate. So let's take your plate first of all and put it onto the top of your shirt. So basically, I've laid the shirt out flat on the table here, and I'm going to put the plate upside down, straight down onto the shirt. And then I'm going to draw around it. So you can use a pen, a pencil, some chalk, whatever you've got to hand. I've got a pencil here at the moment, so I'm just literally going to draw all the way around the edge of the plate. So you can just hold it in place as you go. You don't need to put any weights on top of it or anything like that. You're literally just going to make a circle shape all the way around. This is for an adult mask, so if you were wanting to make one for a child, then you could play around with the measurements slightly and make one slightly smaller, perhaps using a slightly smaller plate or something like that as your pattern piece. So I've drawn around my plate, so I'm just going to remove the plate now and put that to one side. The next thing to do is just to take your scissors, and I'm just going to cut out the circle that I've made. It is important that you are as precise as you can be when you're cutting around your circle, just because that's going to be important a little bit later on. Okay, so you should end up with a circle that looks a little bit like that, literally in the shape of a dinner plate. And then the next thing to do is just move all of the other leftover fabric and whatnot out of the way. We don't need that for the moment. In fact, we don't need that at all unless you're wanting to make a separate face mask. So the next thing we're going to do is actually fold the circle piece in half. So you want to match up all of your edges on one side. So basically like this. So it depends what kind of fabric you're using, and if there is a right side and a wrong side, perhaps you could have flowers on one side and it could be plain on the other side. My fabric, it was an old shirt, but you can't really tell which side is which, so it doesn't really matter. So I've literally just folded it in half there, and what we're going to do next is we're going to cut down this long straight edge. So all you're going to do is you're going to hold it in place with one hand, and then you're just going to cut up the long edge with the other hand. Okay, so you just need to be nice and careful when you do that. Just trying to be as precise as you can. If you really wanted to be a little bit more accurate, you could probably iron the fabric in half if you wanted to, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so then we end up with two separate kind of half moon shapes, which look like this. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put both of the pattern pieces together. So if you were using a fabric that you needed to use a right side and a wrong side, you would put them right sides together, so wrong sides facing up basically. But because I'm using this nice plain fabric, it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to place them just together here. And then at this point you can either use pins or not use pins. I'm not going to use any pins, but that's up to you. If you want to pin around this edge, then you can do. Basically we're going to be stitching all the way around the curved edge, apart from leaving about a 2 centimetre gap. So if you want to measure that and make it a bit more precise, if you can, don't worry. If not, you're basically just going to leave a small gap so that you can turn the whole piece through a little bit later on in the process. So let's get sewing. If you don't have a sewing machine, you can sew this by hand. It might just take you slightly longer. In terms of the seam allowance that you want to use here, I'm literally using the foot width on my sewing machine, so around about 1 centimetre seam allowance, but it's really up to you. Depends how big you want the mask to be, but I would say as close to the edge of your fabric as you can, without it's being too close, if you know what I mean. You want to start sewing and then do a back stitch at the beginning so that the stitching doesn't come undone. Then I'm going to do a back stitch to close that section. Then I'm going to leave the gap that I talked about of around about 2 centimetres. I've not actually marked that amount on my fabric, but I'm just going to guesstimate how much that actually is. Again, we're doing a back stitch. And then off we go. I'm just going to sew all the way around that curved edge. Then just a small back stitch just to finish off. I've actually used a thread that's the same colour as my fabric, but you really don't need to do that. And then all you're going to do, if you have got any long strings of cotton there from your machine, you're just going to snip that off so it's out of the way. You don't need to worry about finishing the edges of your fabric or anything like that, because they're all going to be hidden inside the actual face mask. Right, so you should have a pattern piece that looks a little bit like this. Okay, so it kind of looks like you could put your hand in there if you wanted to. So all we're going to do next is we're going to fold it again, right sides together, and you're going to roughly line up your seams that you've got here. So the rough edges should be showing on the outer side of your fabric. Now if you want to put a pin in here, you can, just to keep it a little bit more accurate. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew around that other edge here, so all the way along that edge. So again, we're sewing the curved edge that we haven't sewn before. And then we should be looking like we have a mask shaped type bit of fabric at the moment, but at the moment it is actually inside out. So the next thing to do is turn the fabric the right way using the little opening that you left previously. So you're just going to use that opening, put your fingers inside. So for me, I can get roughly 2 thumbs inside there, and I'm just going to turn it through all the way. So it might be a little bit fiddly, but you should be able to do it if you just take your time. So then you should have something that looks a little bit like that. Okay, with the idea being that when it's finished, it's going to sit on your face nicely like this. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is just close up this little turning through hole that we left previously. So hopefully you can just bend in the little raw edges, and then we just want to stitch up that little gap that we've got there, so that there's no holes in it anymore, and we can just forget that that bit ever existed really. Again, I'm not going to use any pins, but that's up to you. If you want to put a couple of pins in, feel free. And it is kind of important, if you want the thread not to be seen at this stage when you are stitching up that little hole, that you are going to use a thread that's, you know, roughly the same colour as the fabric that you're using, unless perhaps you're stitching it up by hand, and then you can maybe just do a few invisible stitches there and it really won't matter either way. Okay. So you should basically have a shape. You want the kind of pointy bits sticking outwards along the width, should I say. And then your edge that you've just stitched up, that's going to be the inside of the mask. So, and then on the outside, you shouldn't be able to see any stitching at all at the moment. Okay, so that's what the mask should look like. All we're going to do is we're going to sandwich your elastic between the folded edge. So the elastic is going to sit in the inside of there, then we're going to fold that back and we're going to stitch it. So the next thing we want to do is measure out that elastic and cut it. So you want 2 pieces of 40cm elastic. So I'm just going to use a regular tape measure, but you could use a ruler or anything that you've got at home basically. Cutting the second piece of elastic is slightly more easy because you can just measure the piece that you've just measured already and make sure that the second piece is approximately the same length. Okay, so we've got 2 long pieces of elastic there, so we're going to attach those to our mask. So yeah, so all we're doing is a little thread in the way. So we're going to take the mask, we're going to fold over the edge as we talked about in the corner. And we want to put 2 pieces of elastic just on the inside. So I'm going to do mine and then I'm going to show you what it actually looks like so you can see. Now it may be easier if you have got some pins to hand to actually put some pins in this at this stage just to keep it lying flat. However, you could hold it closed with your fingers and then put it straight under the sewing machine and give it a bit of a stitch. Okay. So you should have, if you are using pins, something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, so you've got your pins in there, you've got your folded over edge, so approximately 1.5 centimetres of a triangle sort of facing inwards, and then you've got your 2 pieces of elastic sandwiched between the fabric, and then you've got your pins just holding it closed. Okay. So you want to try and get your elastic in roughly the right position to match up with the other side. It doesn't matter too much, so don't spend too long worrying about that. Okay, so then we should have a shape that looks a little bit like this. So we've got 2 pieces of elastic around the back here, which make it nice and comfortable to wear in the end. And then we've got the mask shape here as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is literally just stitch along that triangle shape that you've just folded inwards. So you might want to go backwards and forwards on your machine a couple of times just so that it's nice and secure. If you wanted to, you could use a zigzag stitch or something like that. I'm just using a regular straight stitch, and again, if you are sewing by hand, you might just want to put a few extra stitches in just so that the elastic is nice and secure, so that when you are stretching it, there's not going to be a problem. So the final face mask should look a little bit like this. So we've got a nice curved shape at the front, we've got the 2 triangles facing in at the back, and we've got the 2 pieces of elastic. So that should be nice and comfortable to wear. Basically, I found that having the 2 pieces of elastic allows you to move the elastic around as needed. So for me, I've got quite a lot of hair, so I might just want to put one piece of elastic underneath my hair or over the top of my hair, and then you can have the other one underneath, you can have one above your ears, below your ears, whatever works basically. But I just hold this up so you can actually see what it actually looks like. So it actually fits on very nicely, and I'm really pleased with it. I think the nice thing about using cotton is it makes it nice and breathable. I hope you've enjoyed watching today's tutorial, and if you have, please do hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I've got lots of different craft and sewing related videos on my channel, so please do check back if you haven't watched any of my other videos previously. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed watching today. I have enjoyed doing the tutorial. It's been a little bit different, but I hope you found it fun and useful.
Becky, have you seen my pink shirt?
Oh, you mean the salmon one?
The salmon one? Oh.